because the Prime Minister already has issued the economic policy statement of the new government, which has summarized what he is going to do in the next 5-year period, and most of the work will devolve on our Honorable Deputy Minister Wijewardena to implement. So we will have to find out from him how he is going to implement them. So what I would like to take through is that three issues concerning the current budgetary situation. One is the budgetary policy cannot be free from the wider macroeconomic crisis that we are facing in Sri Lanka today. So you can't just isolate the budget and tackle the budget, because we have a wider problem. And budget is only one segment of the wider macroeconomic issue. The second one is the budget has to provide funds for the Prime Minister's economic policy statement. He has lots of things in his mind to implement. So the 2016 budget has to lay foundation for Prime Minister to implement his economic policy program. Third one is, now even in this year 2015, the current budget has missed all the budgetary goals. We started the year with lots of hopes, lots of expectations, lots of pledges, lots of promises. By August, we have only the budgetary numbers for the first 8 months of the year. We have missed all the targets. So it's it's a gigantic task for the finance minister to bring the budget into the jacket which Prime Minister has already prepared for him. So it's a real issue. So I will just take you through very briefly within the 10-minute period that I have been allocated by Faisal. The first one is the macroeconomic issue. Is of course the macroeconomic issue didn't start with this government. We have to be very clear. The macroeconomic crisis in this country started in year 2012, 3 years ago. And what happened was, when the independent economists and analysts, including the Institute of Policy Studies, IPS, in its annual reports, drew the attention of the policy makers, economic policy makers of the government of the oncoming economic crisis, they were just silenced. The previous government thought that they were not patriotic, they were traitors, they were being funded by foreign NGOs, and therefore it was actually, instead of addressing the crisis that the country was being overwhelmed, the government was fighting with the independent analysts. So the crisis has now actually hit on our head now. So we can't escape from that. One is the foreign exchange crisis we are facing today. You would have already noted the government had to depreciate the currency from around 130 rupees per US dollar. Now it's about 142 rupees per US dollar. This. Why the government has to do it? Because we don't have enough foreign exchange. The foreign exchange reserves had been built in the past not by earning foreign exchange but by borrowing from outside. And we were drawing attention of the policymakers to that fact. We are in a critical level. Of the 8 billion US dollars that the government was boasting that we were having as foreign reserves, 6 billion had been borrowed from outside. Out of the 6 billion, 4.5 billion was hot money, which could fly out of Sri Lanka at any time. The money that had been invested by US investors in search of higher interest rates in Sri Lanka, because US interest rates were close to zero level, and we had promised them, you can come and invest in our country, in the government paper, government treasury bills and treasury bonds, and they came and they invested, and the amount was 4.5 billion. So what happened was, now the new government, when it came to power, it had to inherit this headache. And within the first 8-month period, now these 8.5 billion reserves have declined to the latest number, end of October, 6.4 billion. Out of the 6.4 billion, the cash that we have, the ready-made cash, just like imagine that you have a savings account in a bank and the money in the savings account, which you can use at any time for making any payment. It's only 5.5 billion. Now, of course, the new government has got into this the Special Data Dissemination Standards, SDDS of the IMF, and as a result, the central bank can no longer hide information, they have to disclose information. So they have disclosed the information with the next 12-month period, the loan repayments, principal plus the interest payments alone within the next 12-month period will be 4.4 billion. We have only 5.5 billion as the free cash, the money in our savings account. Out of that, within the next 12-month period, we have to pay out by way of repayment of loans as well as the payment of interest, 4.4 billion. So we don't have any money left with us. So we have actually walk to the wall now, and unless we get into an arrangement with IMF, which would stand by us, the situation facing Sri Lanka today is a pathetic situation. It's a pathetic situation, and we don't know how to protect our currency, because any country, because even in October the central bank had sold about 350 million US dollars to protect the rupee at this level, 142 rupees. And we can't go on getting money from Reserve Bank of India under a SOC facility, 1.1 billion, and sell those dollars in the market and protect the currency. So countries which had adopted this strategy, just like say Thailand in year 1997-98, one find they found they don't have any more reserves to defend the currency, and the baht rate declined from 25 baht per dollar to 50 baht per dollar overnight. So this is the economic crisis. Then and the other problem is the reliability of the macroeconomic statistics, the growth numbers, inflation numbers, then micro numbers like poverty numbers, and the unemployment numbers. All these numbers are unreliable because they have been compiled by a government department which was under the direct control of the Treasury Secretary. And what happened was, when the Treasury Secretary announced, okay, the growth rate this year is 10%, the people in the census and statistics will have to work out the numbers for 10%, which is very bad. And that was actually pointed out by JVP in Parliament. And it's a very common thing that was happening. So unreliable numbers. But what the present government did was worse, because they signed off those numbers. And if you look at the annual report of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka for 2014, all these fake numbers have been certified by the annual Central Bank. And now, Honorable Minister cannot go and say, okay, we were going with the wrong numbers. They will say, okay, your own Central Bank is saying these numbers are correct. So how can you confront it? So this is the problem you are having. Then the monetary policy that is being adopted by the Central Bank today is actually contributing to this problem. They are maintaining a low interest rate, and that low interest rate is despite the fact the money supply is growing at 20%, private sector credit is growing at 22%, inflation is picking up from negative level, it's now 2.5% end of October. But what matters to central bank is not this headline inflation which is being published. What matters to is they have another index called core inflation, which actually is free from whatever the measures the government has taken to relieve the cost of living of the people. And that core inflation is rising, it's 4.7% today. So instead of reducing interest rate, so maintaining this low interest rate policy, the central bank has to increase interest rate. And when you have the low interest rates, and at the same time the budget has given a lot of money to the hands of the people, the result is the people are importing goods. Because we are prone to consume imported goods in Sri Lanka. Then we have a huge trade deficit. We had a trade deficit of 8 billion in 2014, and we have 2015 also we have the same trade deficit. So with the trade deficit, we don't have foreign exchange. So as a result, it's the central bank which is creating this foreign exchange crisis for the government. And the failure to assess the oncoming inflation, that's what I said, and then the need for more borrowing to meet the future commitment. Now that is why the government has said it doesn't go, it will not go for this sovereign borrowing, but 2 times. In June it raised 650 million US dollars, and in October it raised another 1.5 billion. And the result is we are accumulating foreign debt. When we accumulate foreign debt, the future governments will have to pay more. Like this government is paying 4.4 billion in the next 12-month period, we are asking future governments to pay more. So this is the macroeconomic crisis we are facing, and the budget is simply one item there. And we will look at the budgetary numbers now. Look at the now the second problem which the government, the budget has to do, it has to align the budget 2016 and the budgets that are to follow with the economic policy statement issued by Prime Minister in Parliament. And Prime Minister has actually told the nation that he will discipline the whole economic system. The government budget, the central bank, the state sector enterprises which are under the care of Honorable Minister, and all these things will be disciplined, and therefore we will have a disciplined economy. But to do that disciplined economy, now one important target of the Prime Minister is by year 2020, he wants to change the tax structure. Right now, our tax earnings are to be 80% through indirect taxes, and Mr. Gajendran will have to work, I think, overtime in order to change the tax structure that way. He will make more money, which is good. Which is good actually, which is good. I mean, he has to make more money, then only we get the best brain out of it. So, current tax structure is the 80% indirect taxes, 20% direct taxes. Despite the fact the income levels of Sri Lankans have gone up from 250 US dollars, they say 10 years ago the per capita income, it has gone up to 3,700 US dollars. So Prime Minister has said by year 2020 he will have a change in the tax structure. 60% indirect taxes, 40% direct taxes. So that means all of us will have to pay more income taxes. So 2016 budget has to lay foundation, has to start this. Otherwise you can't reach this level in 2020. Then the other thing is the budget numbers, I will look at it in the next slide. The current budget is totally unmanageable for the finance minister because he doesn't get enough revenue. He doesn't get enough revenue. And Prime Minister in his policy statement has very clearly said, 15 years ago we were able to raise 19% of our total income, which we call GDP, as revenue of the government. Today it is less than 12%. So it's coming down, and next year also it will be less. So this particular factor has to be taken into account when the minister designs his tax policy for this budget, and it has to be continued with the other budgets also. So the megapolis project, which is another important project of the government, the funds will have to be raised from outside, not through the current budgetary situation, because current budget doesn't have that amount of big money. It has to come from outside. Without that, the megapolis project will not become a reality. Then what is important is, in the new economic policy statement, we are planning to introduce new inventions, new innovations, and introduce new technology to our exports. To do that, we have to spend more money on research and development. That money has to be allocated by the budget in 2016, and starting from that, continuing until such time we have a comfortable rate of research and development. Then we have the missing targets. All the targets during the 8-month period we have missed. The budget deficit expected was 5% of GDP, now it is 8%. And the surplus in the savings of the government, which we call the difference between the government's consumption expenditure and the revenue, expected shortage was some less than 1% of GDP. During the first 8 months, it's about 3% of GDP. So government is spending more on consumption than the revenue, and that's why the Prime Minister said we are living beyond our earnings. That's the meaning of what the statement given by Prime Minister. Then low income tax and all these things have they have actually posed a huge threat to the preparation of the budget in 2016. Then there can be unexpected bailouts, which I would like to draw the attention of the Honourable Minister here, because these are some mistakes we have done in the past. Now this Golden Key company was not a company regulated by the central bank. People who had invested in the Golden Key company, they were actually people who wanted to get a high rate of return. When the company failed, the losses had to be incurred by those guys. But what happened was the finance ministry all of a sudden made the decision to pay compensation, 4 billion Sri Lankan rupees out of taxpayers' money. But it gave a bad precedent. The bad precedent in the sense, if any finance company or any commercial bank fails tomorrow, the central bank or the government cannot say we are not going to pay compensation, because they will always point out, if you can pay compensation for a company which is not being regulated by the authorities, why don't you pay for a company or finance company or a bank which is being regulated by the central bank? So this is an unexpected position, unexpected challenge, unexpected threat. But Golden Key, of course, the payment was only 4 billion. But if some of the small commercial bank or a finance company fails, it will be more than 30 billion rupees in each case. But the finance minister will have to set aside that money to pay. Then the central bank's profit. Now, many of you might think the central bank is an institution which is highly profitable, highly lucrative, because when you go to the bank building, you don't find that kind of an atmosphere in any other place in Sri Lanka. But that central bank made losses in 2013 and 2014. 2013, 39 billion rupees. 2014, 22 billion rupees. Altogether 61 billion. And the capital base of the central bank has declined from 181 billion rupees to 81 billion rupees. 100 billion rupees decline in the capital base. If the central bank makes a further loss in 2015, it is going to make a further loss, because the indications are that it will make this loss. The capital base will further come down. The government will have to rescue the Central Bank of Sri Lanka before it rescues any other bank. And that will be more than 150 billion rupees. It's a unique experience, because many central banks have become bankrupt like that. Central Bank of the Philippines became bankrupt in 1994. Fortunately, the US administration, the government of Japan and IMF came to the rescue of the central bank and they funded it. So I don't think any US government will come and rescue our Central Bank of Sri Lanka. So these are critical issues. I mean, when the central bank was making these losses, I wrote about it in my weekly column. And the response I got was that I have been paid by the foreign NGOs. It is not me who is speaking, my US dollars that are speaking. And the central bank came up with a very fine argument. The central bank doesn't want to make profit. I agree, central bank doesn't want to make profit, but central bank should not make losses. It's true that central bank is not supposed to make profits, but it's not expected to make losses. So now we are heading towards another crisis, because these are unseen things, and even I don't think finance minister is aware of this. Then the subject matter which comes under Honourable Minister, public corporations. In the past, what happened was, the losses in public corporations were slowly, without even the knowledge of the Court or Parliament, they were paid out by the Treasury by using taxpayers' money. Sri Lankan Airlines was paid on several occasions. The total amount that has been paid is more than 30 billion rupees. Similarly, Petroleum Corporation was also paid a similar amount because everybody knows the public finance is a matter for Parliament. If you want to pay the losses of a public corporation, it has to go before Parliament. But what the government did was, even without the knowledge, even I don't think even Faisal was aware of it, Sunday Times. I didn't read in Sunday Times. Without the knowledge of the citizens, without knowledge of Parliament, without knowledge of media, taxpayers' money was used to recoup the losses. So same destiny will befall on our good minister also, because still those public corporations are still being run on losses. For example, I mean, you all come from, I think, the private sector. Imagine a private company having a budget with losses for the next 5 years. If you prepare a budget with losses, what is your position? But this good Sri Lankan Airlines has a budget for the next 5 years, and every year there's a loss. And we can't understand. So these are the critical issues that we are facing. Therefore, in summary, what I would like to say is the budget 2016, don't take it in isolation. You have to take it along with the overall macroeconomic crisis we are facing today. And the issue before the government and the finance minister are not so simple as we think. And therefore, don't expect any relief measures. If you give relief measures, that means we are actually getting our future generation to pay more tomorrow. So thank you very much.